afternoon and welcome everyone to our special webinar today. I'm Deenie from the Property Marketing Strategists, and Sarah is also on the call, who's going to be joining me with the session today. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us this afternoon. It is our first Youth Forum webinar. It's not something we've done before, so thank you for joining for the first one. You should have received a full report from our latest webinar, our latest Youth Forum on accreditation and how students interact with and think about accreditation into your inboxes. And it's all really about kind of how they use it when choosing the room and how it can add value to operators. We set up the Youth Forum just because we felt that actually there wasn't really enough research being done into customers' needs or how customers were viewing the sector. So that's really much the basis of where this Youth Forum has come from. And we're now in our third year, and we've been lucky enough to speak to 80 Gen Z customers and survey over 6,500 young people as part of that programme. So it's a really good test on kind of what your customers are thinking and feeling. We've discussed a range of topics from cost of living to sustainability and community. And really, first and foremost, we want to thank our partners, StudentCrowd and Utopia, for supporting us to be able to bring this to you and all this insight. The reason for this piece of research was really to understand accreditation, whether we're communicating it effectively to customers, how customers are reading and understanding it, and really look at that value for what students are looking for when it comes to a quality mark. We are joined by a very expert panel today, so I will come to them in a minute and let them introduce themselves. But please, if you've got any questions, it's a very short webinar today, a quick, half hour to just discuss these key topics. But if you do have any questions, please put them in the Q&A and we will do our best to answer them, noting that we will also try and get you out within that half hour. But first, it'd be great to introduce our expert panelists. Isaac, if I come to you first, please.
Thanks, Deenie. Well, hello everyone. I'm Isaac. I'm a product owner at StudentCrowd. We help students to make informed decisions about their higher education experience, including where they live, which is in part why I'm here today. It's a bit of a business in two halves, StudentCrowd. So we provide data and insight to the sector, but my focus is on the student experience, understanding what matters to them and helping them make choices. So hoping to share a bit today about what I've learned about the role of accreditation in student accommodation decisions.
Great, thank you, Isaac. And Victoria.
Hi everybody, I'm Victoria Tolmie-Loverseed. I am Deputy Chief Executive at Unipol Student Homes, the national student housing charity. I have a particular responsibility for accreditation schemes, so that includes the national codes. So I was really interested to see the report today and look forward to having a chat about it.
That's great, thank you very much. And I'm going to pass over to Sarah, who's going to kick off with some questions.
So thanks everyone for joining us, and thanks for the intro, Deenie. So what we're going to talk about first of all is when we've been curating this report and discussing lots of things with students, we were also talking to operators and universities that we were doing this. And the first reaction that we had is students don't care about accreditation. Now, I would beg to differ, bearing in mind the report, and if you've all received the report and digested it, hopefully you'll agree. And judging by how many people are watching today, then you all care about it as well. So let's just have a discussion. I'm going to go to you, Isaac, first of all. Do students care whether a property is accredited or not?
I think that they do care. I think that we see that in their behaviour on our StudentCrowd platform. I think the most engaged areas of our profiles for PBSA are reviews, Q&A and images, and I think those are the things that give students confidence in their decision making. And I think the interesting part of that is that many of those topics found in reviews, found in Q&A, are things like maintenance and repairs and communication, safety, security. And just looking through, for example, the Unipol codes, those are all things that accreditation aims to ensure. So I don't think that accreditation is just a badge. I think it reinforces the trust that students form through reading reviews, through reading Q&A, and then gives them that professional assurance that they need when making big financial commitments for booking their accommodation. So I absolutely think it's important and that students care.
Great. So thumbs up from Isaac. Victoria, what about you?
Yeah, well, your research shows that students care about it. 71% of them do. But I think, to be honest, I think they take it for granted that the quality and that safety will be good. They look at these big shiny buildings and they assume that it's going to be professionally managed. They assume that the quality is going to be great. I think on the whole, they're correct. You know, the sector runs things very well and students have a really good time. So I think that, you know, it's a bit like bragging about your internet connection or the fact that you have central heating. I think that people look at these and just think, oh, yeah, of course it'll be well run because it looks like a professional operation. You know, I don't think that students care about the term accreditation because I don't think that term particularly resonates with students. We talk to students about this and that it's not really a term, it sounds very jargony. I don't think it means much to students, but I do think they care about the outcomes. We know that they care about safety, security, well-being, and the research shows that as well. And they'd expect that those things are there. So I think we need to be better at talking to students in language they understand and not say, oh, you know, we'll tell you about accreditation, because I'm not sure that term in itself means much to students.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's very, very honest of you. So thank you, Victoria. I think some of the responses that we got, particularly from international students, and a lot of them are making these decisions from afar, really, that they didn't know that accreditation exists, and obviously they're getting a lot of their information from agents and marketplaces as well. And I think we find quite a lot that international students, they do rely quite heavily on reputation and word of mouth and reviews as well, because they don't have kind of anything else to go on. So I guess when we're looking at the whole ecosystem and maybe the reasons why students either don't care or don't know about it, should there be kind of, I guess, wider training or I guess information available to people like agents and marketplaces, you know, and universities? You know, should they be prioritising operators, landlords, etc., that have accreditation? I guess I'm asking really where the responsibility lies. Victoria, do you want to take this one?
Well, I think students do quite like badges. I think they do get kind of badges and kite marks and quality marks on things. So I suppose the question is, could we be promoting that more? I think for you, from Unipol's perspective, from the national codes, we're currently working on developing an app, basically a technical solution so that we can share with marketplaces our data on who's accredited, because we do think that the students do appreciate seeing that mark and having a little bit more information about it, and that does help them to make decisions about, you know, is this organisation going to be safe and responsible? So I think there is a bit more that could be done there, particularly with the marketplaces. I think there's definitely more that could be done with agents, and that's something that we're having a think about, because I think there are some concerns about the quality of some agents and some of the practices. We're hearing some stories that it's not always very good. So I think that's something we're quite interested in at the moment, but it's quite tricky working. There are so many agents, but it's definitely something that we're interested in at the moment.
That's really, really great to hear. And I think one of the things that we always kick ourselves sometimes about the timing of some of these things. In our survey, 71% said they would pay a higher price for accommodation with quality measures over one that doesn't. When we did our focus groups, that didn't come through quite as loud as clear, and a lot of the students that we spoke to in the focus groups basically said they're looking for cheap accommodation. They don't care, you know, whether it's good quality or not, really. I guess the housing crisis, cost of living situation maybe has masked the need for quality homes, really. And that's not what they're saying. I guess what they're saying and what they're doing are quite different things, really. I guess, Isaac, are you seeing anything related to kind of quality and cost, and does it all come out in the wash?
I think that cost is a great starting place for students. In a lot of the analysis we've done, it tends to be the first thing that they look at. But it's not just about cost, it's about value and value for money and the offering that that property has. And in most of our research, the more features you add, the higher quality, the offering of PBSA, there's a direct correlation between the price that the student is prepared to pay. And I think where students start getting angry and frustrated at higher prices is where that quality isn't present and it doesn't represent a good value for money offering. So I don't think it's true that lower cost is the most important thing. I think that 27% of students say that value for money is a top priority, even over location, when we asked them what their top priority was. So yeah, it's all about value. And if an accredited property is hitting all of those markers for quality and is indicating that it's a high quality offering, then students will pay more.
Do you see that with your operators, Victoria? Is it the higher price properties that are signing up to be accredited, or is there no correlation?
I think that price is obviously a major factor for students, but I think, as Isaac says, when they drill down a bit to the next level, often when you're looking at what's my shortlist, I think for students, when they're looking at a shortlist, they might say, well, I've got 5 that are in my price band, so I'm going to weigh up all of the features, and that's where things like safety and security and quality start to become more important. I think after the pandemic, when we had a serious shortage of housing, I think a lot of students, particularly international students who had very constrained budgets, were willing to, and I think there are a proportion of students still who maybe are willing to trade down on quality for the lowest price because of their own personal circumstances. But typically what they're going to be finding, I think, is stuff that's really at the bottom of the market and is quite often run in a way that may be illegal or would be really substandard quality. And a lot of those properties are not going to be accredited. They're not going to be in the national codes or even in local schemes. So those are the kind of properties that regulation will deal with, that the local authority will know about. So I don't think we're seeing those types of properties, particularly in the codes. No. So yeah, but I don't think that, I think for some students, price really is the most important thing. But I think for far more, actually, they're taking a much broader decision based on lots of factors.
Taking what you kind of said, Isaac, around kind of value for money, you both said about value for money and the focus on price. I think one of the things that came across from the survey and the focus groups was, I think you mentioned this earlier, Victoria, about that really understanding of what accreditation is. And I think a lot of accreditation meant that it's passed, basic safety standard test and there's nothing more. But actually, obviously, in the codes, there's a lot more detail and depth into actually what a provider is doing to be credited with that code. Do you think we could do more about getting that information across to students so that actually they really understand that mechanism between value for money, I guess, in relation to price?
Yeah, definitely. I think that there's a lot more that providers could be saying about their own good practice and what they do, and providing a lot more detail in that area for reassurance for students and also for their parents. We know parents are really involved in the decision-making process, and quality marks are really important for parents. I think the National Code could do a bit more in this area. We've recently made quite a big investment in marketing, and we're going to start to do quite a lot more work in this, promoting the national codes, and particularly around the Renters' Rights Bill. When that comes in, we'll be doing a lot more communication around that. So there's a bit more that we could do, but I think members should talk more and blow their own horn a bit more about the good work that they do as well.
Absolutely. One of our services is a mystery shopping service, and we've got students all over the UK and Ireland mystery shopping hundreds of properties, and we've looked through all of their reports, and there is not a single operator or building that has ever mentioned that their property is accredited when doing viewings. So that shows that they're keeping it back. And I just wanted to kind of build on what you just said about the Renters' Rights Bill, Victoria, that it's going to start separating out student accommodation. As far as we're aware, the bill will have one rule for PBSA and one rule for landlord managed properties, basically. So surely this is an amazing opportunity for the buildings that are part of the National Code to really double up on why they're different, because there are lots of things that PBSA will be able to do that HMOs won't, but not all of them on paper will work in the student's favour. And we think that PBSA are going to have to work a little bit harder to kind of double down on all of the great things that they do, and one of the things is part of the accreditation. Are you seeing an increase, Victoria, in inquiries from providers and kind of more people wanting more of that marketing material that you just spoke about?
I think that we know that we need to put more information out there when the Renters' Rights Bill happens, when it's enacted. That students are going to need a lot more advice and understanding of the differences in their rights in the different sectors. And I think as a PBSA operator, I would be asking myself, I was part of the comms team now, students are going to look at their choices and they're going to ask themselves, why would I live in that big building when I have much more flexibility and rights if I choose a house? What is different? What's better about that than somewhere where I can give 2 months notice and have a much more flexible time of it? And I think it's really time for providers to think about, why are we different? Why are we special? Why are we responsible people that take, we have obligation. There are going to be new obligations for providers built into this legislation. And I think that operators need to think about and communicate why they're special, responsible and fair organisations, and not to appear inflexible and uncaring in comparison to off-street property. So I think it's a big challenge, but it's a communications challenge. It's something that I think people organisations will get right, but it's different. It's going to be a very different marketplace in a year's time.
Yeah, absolutely. When we were asking students about kind of what they think accreditation or equality mark is, we got a variety of different answers. A lot of them were around safety and security, and we had one that talked about environmental standards. We had a student that were talking about provision for their specific additional needs that they had. I guess between all of the kind of, great minds in the sector, do we think that enough of these things are covered in the code? If there are more things, have students got even higher expectations than what the code is currently covering?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, we've done quite a lot of talking to students recently because we're reviewing the national codes at the moment. The private sector code is being reviewed as part of the Renters' Rights Bill and making changes for that. So we've done quite a lot of work with students to understand what would they like to be in the code, in a new version of the code. And there are things that are definitely on the wish list, additional, restrictions on use of guarantors. Guarantors are a real problem for most students, and they think it's unfair, that they're so widely used. Laundry, they'd like to see much that. The students don't understand why you have to pay for that when you've already paid your rent. It should be free, surely, or regulated much more fairly. So there's definitely a lot more that students would like to see in the code, and I think we'll have to think about how we meet those expectations for students. But those additional things might come to a future version of the code. Yeah.
And Isaac, what do you see about kind of what students want, I guess, away from the product, sort of more around the service?
I think that one of the most frequently mentioned phrases in our reviews is around staff. and the service that they receive. And I suppose it depends if you're counting maintenance as a part of the product as well, but there's a big correlation between the quality of staffing and service and support and provision that a student gets from living in a building. And again, it comes back to that conversation of value and their perceived quality of their experience. So I think that I did look through the codes, and I think there is stuff in there around staffing and the support, but I think that particularly in Gen Z, and as do we dare start looking ahead to Gen A, it'll probably be very important to have that defined in the codes as well. Even if it's not provision being provided by the accommodation, signposting students in the right directions for those sorts of services, I think will be important.
Yeah, I was just going to come on to that actually. I'm just looking at the statistics, and 64% of our respondents looked for properties which were endorsed by their university after their first year. So that's great that they're looking for information about accommodation, from their university. But our universities prioritising accredited properties, and I guess vice versa, I guess those accredited properties and operators making themselves known to universities. What can you speak of about that kind of relationship, Victoria?
Well, I think universities should have really clear, unambiguous information about accreditation and recommending that students only rent from accredited providers and landlords. And I think your research shows that students expect that as well. So I think, students expect that from their universities, and I think universities should be really clear about making those recommendations, and they certainly shouldn't be working with unaccredited providers of accommodation. So yeah, I think it's a really easy win for universities to do that, and I think more of them should do it. And I think providers, what's going to happen with the Renters' Rights Bill is we're all going to be on a much more of a level playing field in terms of rights and obligations on providers. The kind of contract that private providers will be able to use, is it going to be very similar to what universities currently do? And I think that similarity will make it quite a bit easier for universities and private providers to work together in a more kind of collaborative way, because they're going to have quite similar contractual arrangements. It should make things easier around well-being and support for students as well. So I do hope that there'll be more collaboration and cooperation between universities and the private sector as a result of this. But that's definitely something that we've picked up. We had our National Codes Conference last week, and a big theme of it was around liaison and better working together between universities and the private sector.
That's great to hear. We've got a few minutes left. I just want to remind people that if they've got questions, to add them in the Q&A, and we'll get onto them at the end. But in the meantime, I've still got some more questions to ask, so you're not off the hook yet. I guess, what advice would you give to accommodation providers who are accredited? Because I don't know, from the outside looking in, I guess we feel like they've gone to the effort, they've done a big amount of work to make sure that their buildings and their staff are meeting standards. So what's the next step? What's some easy wins that they can take out of this webinar to start promoting themselves better?
Isaac, you go first.
I think we've mentioned a couple of times that it's mainly a communication issue and a visibility issue. And I think we also mentioned badges earlier. I think badges are really useful, and they are like a great visual tick if you understand the badge and you understand what it represents. But I think there's a bit of a storytelling challenge and a journey challenge as well, where we have to meet students where they are and the level of education they have, and we do have a responsibility to educate them about the sector and try and teach them some of the jargon. But I dare say for most, it's about building trust with those students and taking them on that journey to the point where they, through making a decision to book your property, they understand the reasons that you have been accredited, and then the badge or the stamp is just a tick at the end. So I think everyone on this call will have talented marketeers and designers in their teams, and it's kind of challenges like this that they really thrive on, especially designers, of how do we build trust with our users and how do we educate them and teach them as they go through the experience of our platforms. And there are ways to do that, perhaps on top of just sticking a badge on, that will mean that we get a better return on investment of that accreditation anyway. So I think badges, great first step, and something that we're looking at StudentCrowd for the Unipol codes over summer, but also a storytelling responsibility and educating them as well. So yeah, find places on your sites to shout about why you've got accredited and why that makes your property great, I think.
Yeah, what Isaac said.
Yeah, I think we've been talking, and learning, I guess, particularly around the Renters' Rights Bill at the moment, and it is those things that make private providers different, and that they need to start shouting about, because going through the code and the accreditation process shouldn't be a tick boxing exercise, on the basis that it is so. It's clearly not being talked about on viewings with students. We do wonder how much the staff in the buildings actually understand about what the process has been and how they got there. And bearing in mind, a lot of them will have had to have done things to meet the criteria, but maybe they don't understand why and the way that it can be communicated, to the customer, to the students, to parents, to universities as well. So I think from our point of view, we would really, really love it to be much more part of the process.
I think I was just going to add to that, Sarah, is that I think we've worked a long time in the sector, but I don't think being part of the code is rarely a key message in your marketing messages around actually what marketeers are dealing with. And I think actually what this research has proven, that actually there is real value in making it part of the key message. And I think, Isaac, you make the point extremely well around this isn't just about saying Unipol, national code's accredited somewhere. It's about doing that in a nuanced way so that it's built into that story. Because I think at the moment it is very much, I've put the logo on and therefore it's visible. But actually there is now an argument, I think, now to go back to kind of that communication message. Say, yes, all these other benefits are important to communicate, but this is another benefit that we need to communicate. And I think, as Sarah said, that also starts with educating kind of your workforce who all work with customers to make sure they're aware of what that is, what the benefits are. So it just becomes part of that storytelling, not just I've added a line in, I've put a badge on it. It's about adding that value, which I think also links into what we were talking earlier about that mismatch between what accreditation is and actually everything that goes into the accreditation of a building under the national codes.
Yeah, I think it's a great place to kind of, I guess, end today's webinar, really, is that there's a lot of work that's already been done in the sector. There's a bit of a mismatch between expectations and reality or assumptions. So there's a really, really great benchmark to kind of work on, I think, for everybody that's tuned in today and everybody that's downloaded the report as well. We may well revisit this topic in another year's time or another 2 years' time and actually see if those perceptions have changed and see if kind of the accreditation has become more visible. So I'm just going to say thank you very much to Victoria for being so interested in supporting this piece of research on behalf of Unipol and joining us today. And thank you very much, Isaac, for not only StudentCrowd being our sponsors today, but also contributing with the amazing amount of data that you have about student search as well. I know that everybody that is still here that you have received the report. We'll be launching it more publicly because you guys are the special ones that got it super early. So we'll be releasing it publicly this week as well. So please let us know what you think when you've digested it. And if you've got some success stories of things that you're going to do based on what you've learned from the report and the webinar, we'd love to hear about them as well. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube and Instagram to keep up to date with our research and news. We've got sound bites from students from our focus groups on our YouTube channel who are able to articulate their thoughts and feelings far better than we have been able to in the report and on the webinar. So please do make sure that you look at those. Thank you again, StudentCrowd and Utopia, for sponsoring our youth forum, and we look forward to seeing you all next time. Thank you very much.